It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us to talk about beauty, what it is, and why it matters is Dr. John Mark Miravalle. Thanks for being here, Doctor.
Thanks so much for having me, Kyle.
So, what is the last thing that you either saw or heard that you thought, man, that is really beautiful, or something that sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, this is going to sound a little cliche, but obviously my kids, right? My kids and my wife. But yesterday, okay, I'll tell you what. Yesterday, my wife was on the phone, and we have a small house, but we got a really nice backyard. And the people before us, it's all due to them. They put a pretty little pond with a bridge, which we haven't ruined yet. Anyway, just my wife was walking around talking and smiling to the person, and boy, it was yesterday. It was a great. I was moving, and I stopped, and I sat, and I thought my wife is very pretty, and this world is very pretty, and I'm a very lucky guy.
Yeah. So, is beauty objective, or is it in the eye of the beholder? And how do we determine what is beautiful?
Yeah, so it is objective in the classical Catholic philosophical tradition, and even to an extent previously. Being, goodness, and truth are all intrinsically identical. So if truth is objective and goodness is objective, then beauty is objective. And obviously, since the world is increasingly relativizing the first two, it'll be relativizing beauty, and we need to resist that. And the way we do that is by recognizing that beauty involves something, I think, this is my attempt to sort of synthesize the tradition. Beauty involves something that is orderly and surprising. And by orderly, I basically mean something that conforms to its nature, something that is the way it's supposed to be and acts the way it's supposed to act. That's order, and that's something objective because the natures of things are objective. So if something conforms to its nature, it's orderly, and that's objective. But it's also surprising. We recognize that it might not conform to its nature. We recognize it might not even be. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When a kid takes their first step, the parents are always thrilled. It's like a beautiful moment, right? Sometimes they call their spouse crying or something like that. He took his first step. And the spouse says, well, what did you expect? You know, people walk. Kids walk. That's part of the nature. I know, but it's so exciting. It's so thrilling. I just can't believe it. It's wonderful. That's beauty. Beauty is being thrilled at the normal. Beauty is being delighted and astonished at things working the way they're supposed to, because you know that it didn't have to be this way. Things might not exist and things might not work right. Appreciating the normal is recognizing the beautiful.
How would you relate that then to a painting? It seems like some paintings are very realistic and normal, and maybe you'd say that conforms with what you would expect. Other things are more abstract, and some things are maybe larger to tell a story or something like that, and something might be smaller, so it might not actually look realistic. Are both of those beautiful?
Yeah, they can be, as long as there's order. So consider order in the natural world. Order means regularity, but more specifically, it means design. Order expresses intelligence, and surprise expresses freedom. So the natural world, for instance, is orderly and surprising. It's regular, but we're still astonished when we find out something new about it. And that means that it expresses a person, the ultimate tripersonal God, who is intelligent and free. So to the extent that a painting expresses intelligence through its order, and that order could be simply the congruity of the colors, or could be the truth of the narrative, it could be the realism or the stylized truth that's being presented, that's all order. And to the extent that it's fresh and it's creative and it's new, that makes it surprising. And that's very important to remember, that you don't want just order and you don't want just surprise. Our God is a God of order, but he is also a God of surprises. He's a God who makes all things new. And that's why we long for something fresh, for something new. Aquinas actually says that that which is new makes us delight more. But that has to be in something that expresses intelligence through order.
So you mentioned the transcendentals, truth, beauty, and goodness. What does the Venn diagram look like for that? Can you have truth without goodness and beauty? Are they really pretty much all the same thing? Like you have to have all three of them in one? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So reality itself is simple. And insofar as something has being, insofar as it has existence, it is true and good and beautiful. But we receive it differently. So imagine that you clap your hands in front of your face. You would feel that, you'd see it, and you'd hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you had a problem with one of your senses.
Mm-hmm.
So insofar as we receive being as the object of our intellect, we call it truth. And insofar as we receive being as what is fulfilling to our will, and the object of our will, we call it the good. But insofar as we receive beauty through our ability to actually feel about spiritual realities, to actually physically respond, that's why we get goosebumps at the beautiful. We call that beautiful. That's why Aquinas says that beauty is that which delights when seen. It's something that passes not just through our intellects and through our will, but into our passions.
So what about tastes? Like, I might like 90s alternative music. You might think it's trash and only listen to, 80s hip hop, I assume. So
yeah, right.
How do we account for different people's tastes in what they find beautiful or attractive?
Yeah. Well, there's two things there. One is our faculties are not all developed at the same rate. So, for instance, I may know more about a certain area than you do, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. And therefore be able to appreciate it more.
And therefore be able to appreciate it more.
Okay.
Also, our faculties can be warped, right? Our faculties can get twisted.
Sure.
Which is precisely what happens actually when we start to, for instance, seek surprise apart from order. Then we develop a taste for perversion. But difference of taste, difference of preference simply in itself could just indicate that we've developed our appreciation in different areas. So, for instance, my kid's favorite food is hot dogs, which is fine. We're trying to cultivate their tastes for other foods to make them appreciate. And I would say that's a moral imperative. Be developing your appreciation for reality constantly. Just like we need to learn more and we need to do more good. We need to grow in all our human faculties.
We're talking with Dr. John Mark Miravalle. The book is Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. And the way you've been describing beauty, I think, is different than maybe a very generic / worldly definition of beauty. Can you explain maybe what we get wrong usually when we describe beauty, or maybe kind of this inferior definition of beauty?
Well, I think there's lots of different ways that people sort of describe beauty. I guess what I would say is that in the realm of fine arts right now, and often in the realm of, say, personal entertainment, people are simply seeking surprise, they're seeking novelty, they're seeking attention-getting, divorced from the order. Now, not everybody does that. There's also some people who just like cliche, holy card stuff without anything that challenges them. But I would say for the most part in the secular world, you have in the high art world just people doing weird, bizarre, strange things to get attention. And I would say they have latched on to half of beauty, the surprise part. You see that very much in human sexuality, which is one of the most vivid areas of beauty. You need to be surprised to be attracted sexually to someone else. You have to have surprise. But when you give in to just that aspect, there's this phrase in sexuality, the erotic is the exotic. But when you give in to just the surprise, what happens? Well, you go down the rabbit hole of fetishism. And you start looking at more and more perverse and bizarre and weird stuff, and you've actually left beauty behind. So I think what a lot of people have done is they've seized on one half of beauty and isolated it from the rest. And that's where you get this, whatever moves me, that's beautiful.
How do you feel about abstract art?
Well, part of it, right, depends on what people are trying to do. Because almost all representational art is stylized. Art isn't geared at perfect likenesses the way, a police sketch artist would be, or the guy who draws the chalk outline around the body. You're not going for exact replica. If abstract art is trying to show something and make you appreciate it in a new way, in a given case it might be, or if it's simply trying to display an orderly pattern, something like a quilt pattern or a flower bed, that might be fine. I myself am not particularly developed in that sensibility. My concern is, I think a lot of times, if not most times, Abstract artists are just trying to do something new, weird, provocative, attention-getting. They're not actually trying to help you celebrate reality. They're trying to cause you to celebrate them and their ego. And that I think is very concerning.
You talked a little bit about these perversions of beauty. But would you have a definition for something that's ugly?
Yes, an ugly thing is that which is either disordered or banal.
Okay.
So if you take order and remove it from surprise, that becomes ugly. So for instance, Roger Scruton shows a video. Somebody took Michelangelo's David, and they made something like 20 copies of it for their driveway. So it's just one David after another. And the mindless repetitiveness of this makes it stale. It's really tragic. It's really ugly. It's really a disaster because you have this order, this pattern, but the pattern divorced from any thoughtfulness or any creativity, any newness. And I think a lot of people, right, this is where you get really bad traditionalism, is where people just think we're going to circle the wagons, we're not going to sing a new song unto the Lord, we're not going to take the timeless truths of our faith and find new ways to preach the gospel. We're just going to do the same thing over and over and over because we know that's safe. I think that's ugly. I think that's ugly. And then, as I've already mentioned a couple times, I think taking surprise apart from order is also ugly because that leads to perversion. I think a great recipe for living beautifully and for making beautiful things is Chesterton's famous line from Man Alive, break the conventions, but keep the commandments. If you break the conventions, you will be doing new things. You will be creative. You will be not confined and restricted to dull, monotonous patterns. But if you keep the commandments, that means you will always be doing things that correspond to your nature. And so that you will be living an orderly life. And that's what the saints do. Mm-hmm. The saints break the conventions and they keep the commandments, and we look at them and we delight.
I like that. What about form versus function? Is there a balance there?
Yeah, so when you look at the types of arts that are meant to beautify physical needs, right? We don't just want to cover our bodies. We want to make nice-looking clothes. We don't want just shelter. We want beautiful homes. We don't just want nutrition that we inject or gulp down. We want fine cuisine. So in all those areas, if we're trying to be truly human and fully human, we want to beautify even the satisfaction of our physical needs. I keep trying to explain this with the kids in manners. Why do we need manners? To show that even in satisfying your body, you're more than an animal. Mm-hmm. To delight the soul even as you serve the body. So in a utilitarian world where the goal is to serve the body as quickly and efficiently as possible, and that's the only goal, you get ugly buildings, you get fast food, you get mass-produced clothes, and it becomes a consumer nightmare. So function is important, particularly in these arts where you are trying to serve the body. But it can't be the ultimate and it can't be the only criterion for what you're doing.
At what point does it become indulgent? Because I could see, looking at my house, it's maybe we don't have anything hanging up the walls right now. And, we should add some beauty here. At what point does it say, like, okay, well, that, $2 million painting is way too extravagant, obviously. But where do we draw the line between beautifying things versus going overboard?
Well, I think probably it comes in terms of priorities. So, for instance, in the Old Testament, God is constantly saying to the people, stop beautifying your own house while you're not doing anything to build the temple. And you have someone like Judas, right, complaining about the extravagance of the oil bestowed on our Lord's feet, right? So, right. And in my house, for instance, this is how I say it. I know a lot of dads, they have a hard time because, we got 5 kids, and our house is usually a mess. It's not orderly and surprising. It's the Miravalle's house of piles. But the way I sort of make sense of that is to say right now the main masterpiece we're focusing on is our children. And as Aquinas says, the primary form of beauty is the virtue of what he calls honesty. And that simply means the beauty of living a virtuous life. John Paul II said we're called to make masterpieces of our own lives. So I think of our house as our palette, and our paintings are our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really worry about the palette while you're focusing on the painting. But when the paintings move out, I'm looking forward to cleaning up the palette, making it a little more orderly and surprising. So again, I think it's a question of priorities and realizing that there's a hierarchy of the beauty we need to be focusing on, but at least making sure that beauty is on your radar,
Sure.
and that this is a way to serve the souls of those around you and to edify yourself.
All right. Well, so many more questions I have, but people are just going to have to check out the book. So where should we send people to go get it?
Just the Sophia Institute website.
All right. And again, it's called Beauty, What It Is, Why It Matters. Also a beautiful cover. So you got to...
Yeah, didn't they? They did a nice job. If you don't like the book, you can just take the cover and hang it somewhere.
Well, yeah. You probably would have been in trouble if you had an ugly cover with a book called Beauty.
I don't know, man. They could have screwed it up. They could have put like a waterfall or a rose with dew or some screensaver. So I was grateful.
I'm glad too. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. This is great.
Thanks, Kyle. God bless.